Hello again, I'm Tripp Rogers, and this is Tripp's Take. It was on this week in 1956, the game show The Price is Right debuted on television. Now, it was first hosted by Bill Cullen. It went off the air for a while and then came back in 1972 on CBS as part of a new daytime lineup that they had. Bob Barker was the host, and the show, of course, is an iconic game show, one of the longest running game shows in television history, now hosted by Drew Carey. It's time for the story of how yours truly went on The Price is Right and ended up with a pair of electric guitars and a washer dryer. Let me explain. When I first got married, we would watch The Price is Right, and we had planned a trip out to Las Vegas in April of 1995 or March of 1995 to coincide with the NCAA tournament. And we said, hey, wouldn't it be fun to go to The Price is Right, go to a taping of The Price is Right? So that's what we did. We drove from Vegas to LA and we attended the taping. Now, there's a couple of things you have to understand. First of all, they tape 2 shows a day. There's no guarantee you're going to be on the show. You have to wait in the audience and then they process you. And there's no guarantee. Then you have to appear in front of the producer and then you go in and sit down. Even then, you do not know if you are going to be on the show. But if you notice, everybody's very friendly. When they get up and they're called, everybody's slapping them on the back and stuff. Well, that's because you've spent pretty much the entire day with them. Believe it or not, they tape at 1:15 and 4:45. So again, you get to know your seatmates an awful lot. Well, anyhow, I went before it. Now, a buddy of mine and his wife had appeared on The Price is Right, and he kind of told me some tips, which I used. So when I went in front of the producer, I was really Mr. Enthusiasm. I was like, yeah, here I am. And I was really excited and stuff, and I really gave it the old oomph. And, of course, my then wife, Sue, hit me as we're walking away saying, you stole my line, because everybody in front of me was retired. I said, I'm a far from retired substitute school teacher is what I was at the time, which is the truth. I didn't mention I worked in broadcasting at the time. But anyhow, so you go into the taping, and the other thing that is kind of amazing is that the studio is really small. You never realize how small it is until you sit in there and you realize it. And I mean, it's nonstop, but this is back when Bob Barker was the host. And I was sitting towards the front, and I'm kind of a big guy. And Bob Barker would take questions from the studio audience. So at the first break, he asked questions. I was the first person to ask a question. I asked him a couple of questions. And so, Bob knew who I was. And, it was a fun show to watch. But again, you're there, and you do not know what is going to happen. You do not know if you're going to get the call. Well, the first contestant to fill contestants row after the showcase showdown, the first showcase showdown, was yours truly. And as soon as my name was called, my then wife Sue shrieked so loud it sounded like somebody knifed somebody. And Roddy started laughing because she was so loud. It was so funny. And again, you get up there, there's this rush of adrenaline, and you're like, and Bob's asking me questions, and I'm like, yeah, Bob. Okay, yeah, love the show, Bob. Yeah, let's keep going. The thing of it was, the first prize that we had was a washer and dryer. Now, we had bought one a year before, so I kind of knew what I needed to bid, and my bid was $900. Well, everybody started to go below me. And, that was the thing that was kind of interesting. And when they announced that I was the high bidder, I get up on stage. So Sue jumps up. She's got a Price is Right shirt on. It's great. She's shrieking again. And I come up on stage and I have to play the pricing game. I played the 4 price tag game and I totally screwed it up. I had it, I was halfway home and then I screwed it up the second run. But again, you're doing this, you're all on adrenaline. It was funny because Bob Barker talked to me while they were describing the prizes. It was hysterical. I remember Bob talking to me, and all I could think of was, I said to him, I'm just glad we're not doing the golf putting game because my buddies would have laughed me home. And he goes, no, you're not. So, but anyhow, so I was the first winner in the second half of the show, and I won a pair of electric guitars. So I had, of course, the prize that got up on stage, which was the washer and dryer and a pair of electric guitars. So I then had to wait until the Showcase Showdown. And in the second half of the show, I was the person who won the least amount. Somebody won a car in our half of the show, too. So I go up there, and I got to tell you something. That wheel is heavy. It really is. So I gave it a spin, 75 cents. All right, I'm staying, Bob. So I go over 75 cents. Next guy goes next to me. He throws 75 cents. So he comes over. We're tied. So the third guy goes, who had won the car, and he goes over. So then we go back for a Showcase Showdown. All right. I go, spin the wheel, 75 cents again. The kid who went after me threw $1 and beat me. So that was it. And the thing I learned afterwards is that's the only time you can appear on The Price is Right. It's one and done. Now, I could go attend the taping if I wanted to, but they would know that I could not be on the show. I'd go through the screening process and everything, but they would know I'm not the person. You're only allowed one shot, one bite at the apple. Well, the funny thing was the show was taped about a month before it aired. So the day it aired, we're all sitting there. We didn't tell anybody what had happened. We kept our mouths shut. And so, again, Sue and I were the only ones who knew. The day before, I confided in my friend Mark, whose wife had been on the show, and I told him what had happened. So we're watching it the next day, and it was funny because the reaction that everybody had, they were watching me go on the show, and I said, yeah, it's the second half of the show. And so we at least told them that. I mean, I wasn't going to be that bad. But it was great. But now you have to get the prizes. Well, the washer and dryer came like 3 days later. It was unreal. And they ended up at my mother-in-law's house because, we didn't need a washer and dryer. The electric guitars, that's another story. I had to wait a year and a half to get those electric guitars, and I finally got them, but they weren't the ones that I was supposed to win. They were a couple of cheap guitars. Well, I ended up selling them because at the time needed some money because my daughter was about to be born, and we needed the money at that. That's when we finally got them, believe it or not. But the irony also is that you have to pay income tax in California. You're not a resident in California. You got to pay California income tax. So that year I was working in New York too, so I had to pay New Jersey tax, New York tax, and California tax. The only time you had to do that. And you had to pay taxes on your winnings. Again, that's something to watch out for. If you ever win a contest or win a prize, you get you have to pay taxes on that prize. Now, again, I was a couple $1,000s that I won, but these people that win $10,000, $20,000. I mean, that's those prizes that are worth that, I should say. That's an awful lot of money. But that's my story of how I got on The Price is Right. It was a lot of fun. And, I will say at the time, everybody raved about Barker's beauties. And there were, of course, 3 very lovely ladies. And I got to see them up close. And let me tell you something. TV, they're a lot prettier in person than they were on television. Again, that's my opinion. But the funny thing is kind of it's like the Wizard of Oz and the behind the curtain. And I don't watch The Price is Right anymore. In fact, we stopped watching it shortly after we had been on it because of the fact that, the mystery had kind of gone away and we kind of knew what was going on. Same thing with The Tonight Show, because we saw The Tonight Show that time with Jay Leno. We used to watch it all the time, and we kind of stopped watching it because, it was, we had seen it and we were live. We were in the studio audience. I mean, so that's the story of how I made it on The Price is Right. Won a pair of electric guitars. They're nowhere to be found. The washer and dryer, by the way, lasted till the 2010s. I mean, it wasn't a bad thing to get. And like I say, I have the videotape somewhere. If I pull out a videotape recorder, I'll have to transfer it over to digital at some point so I can see it. That is Tripp's Take for Thanksgiving Day 2024, November the 28th. I want to wish you and yours a very happy Thanksgiving and the start of the holiday season. If you've got questions or comments, please feel free to email tripstake@gmail.com. Fantasy football players, the Fantasy Sultans are here to help you. Next week, another big week of buys, and the start of the playoffs for some folks. Otherwise, it's the last week of the regular season. The Hall of Famer Mike Sheck and yours truly give you the Fantasy Sultans podcast. It drops every Thursday morning at 9 o'clock. You can find it the same places you find Tripp's Take, on Spotify for podcasters, and also on YouTube. Just search for the Fantasy Sultans. If you like the music of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, give a listen to WTRSradio.com. Thank you for joining me. I hope to see you again next week. For now, I'm Tripp Rogers. Make it a great one, and happy Thanksgiving.